Welcome to the Next Conquered Leaders Amazon Live broadcast. I'm Mark Pittman, your host for this series, as I currently am engaging with authors that are doing really cool stuff and helping leaders and others tell their stories and live their lives to their fullest. Today, I am thrilled beyond the moon to have Melanie Deziel with me. She's the author of Content Fuel Framework. She's a keynote speaker, and that's how she and I know each other. She's also an award-winning branded content creator. She's the chief content officer of Story Fuel, the author of the Content Fuel Framework, which you can see if watching on Amazon Live right below us. And she is the mom of an 18-month-old, which is very, very cool. Congratulations. Thanks for being here, Melanie.
Thanks. Yeah, it's good to catch up. I know we don't get to see each other on the road anymore, so it's always nice
Isn't that
to have
weird?
a little FaceTime, right? It is. It's very weird.
That's
I
true.
miss all my friends in other cities.
I hadn't thought about this as sort of like the airport crossing conversation series. Maybe that's what I can call it.
Yeah.
From branding. See, you've already helped me with my branding. You're a
There you
brilliant.
go.
You're a genius at this. What I loved about your book when I was reading it last fall was that I always feel like I just don't have. I think I'm probably not alone in this, but I feel like I devalue my stories. And so when I'm looking for stories, I'm looking for the amazing thing that's amazing to me, not to everybody else. And I don't feel like I have a system. I've been doing content creation since 1999 with my first blog. So I've been intentional about it, but I still feel like I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants. So is it for you, are good stories created, or are they born or made? It's sort of like leaders. Are they born or are they created?
I think it's a combination. They're kind of like gems. Like they occur naturally, but you still have to mine them efficiently to uncover them.
Ooh,
That's kind of my approach, I think.
I love that.
Because I think, yeah, we all have these stories, but very similarly to what you were experiencing, I think we don't think our own stories are that interesting to other people. Well, some people do. Some people think everything about their lives is interesting.
The special people.
Yeah. But most of us have that sort of experience of like, well, who am I to talk about this? Or people won't care, or this isn't really that interesting, or this is inside baseball. It's only I care about this. But people are infinitely curious, and there's so much to what we do that's interesting to other people just because they don't do it. I like to think of, if you've ever, especially kids, I still do it as an adult, but you've ever seen like the guys making the pretzels at the mall or something,
Right.
or the pizza dough, like they don't think that's a special talent or particularly interesting because they do it all day. But for us, like we're pressed up against the glass, like, wow, I bet I could make a pretzel, I bet I could toss the dough. It's like a totally different experience from the outside.
I love that too. What you're saying about the stuff, it's special for us because we don't do that stuff. When we're looking at those,
Yeah.
That's so true. Well, I was going to ask you a different question, but we'll get to that. So, what you were saying too about the people have already said this, or I'm not that inspiring. I know I run into that as an author writing books. It's sort of like because I try to pride myself on. This sounds awful. Not being innovative in a way. Like I don't want to test. I don't want my readers to be the guinea pig of my experiment. I would like to report stuff that has actually been proven to work. So what
Yeah.
was it like for you writing your own book? How did you come? What was your journey to doing this?
Well, that word report just like rings deep in my soul because I'm a former journalist. So that very similar approach, and that like for me, it feels like it's my job to figure out this information, to mine this knowledge, to get these examples, and then present it to my audience so that they can learn from it and benefit from it. So yeah, my book is very similar in that I'm not reinventing the wheel. I mean, you always pay attention to like the one bad review that you get, like it sticks in your brain.
I have no idea what you're talking about. No, I'm just kidding. Yes.
The one bad review was the guy that's like, well, she just listed off a bunch of types of content and I'm like, yeah, that's true. That's exactly what I promised to do. It's really about thinking about it in a new way. I'm not trying to invent, new formats or new social platforms in the book. I'm really just trying to give you an ordered way to think about it. And so, yeah, the goal is, at least in my mind, not to necessarily innovate what we're producing, but to innovate the way we produce it, to change the way we think about it. I think it makes for an easier transition. You stop having as many of those like frustrated, what do I post? I've got nothing to say moments.
Oh, the blank screen is just yeah, can be mind numbing and really
Yeah.
destabilizing. So how did you go from, this could be my ignorance, go from journalism to content creation? And as I say that, journalism is content creation, but
Yeah.
it seems like there's a difference from what you're doing, what you did in between writing the book and journalism. Does it seem like
Yeah.
that to you too?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
100%. So for me, it was honestly, it was out of necessity. So my two specialties when I was in the reporting world was arts and cultural criticism and in-depth investigative reporting, which if you're at all familiar with the media space, you know that when the newsrooms downsize and people get cut, those are generally the first two teams that the cane pulling them off stage, right? So there weren't as many of the kinds of jobs that I was really passionate about. And so I had this whole skill set of, telling stories and creating on deadline and reporting and all these things and just trying to think, well, where else could I put this stuff to use? And so that's how I ended up kind of making that shift into more the content marketing side of things. So I started using those skills to tell stories for brands. And realizing that a lot of what we were doing, it overlaps so well. It's the same skill set that we're using in the journalism world on the marketing side, or it should be. And when we do translate those skills, the stories that we tell come across so much better. They're so much more engaging and compelling. So yeah, I like to think of myself as like a journalist who kind of snuck over the line, and I'm like incognito doing journalism in the marketing world. Yeah, secret agent, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. So what's incredibly engaging to me is that the reviewer that you mentioned before, all the stuff that they saw as a deficit, I see as a benefit. I want a framework because I don't want to keep reinventing the wheel if I don't have to. What are some tips that you give to people that say that I'm just not creative or my stories are just too boring?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's really challenging about coming up with story ideas is that we tend to start with the format, the way that it comes to life. So we're thinking like, I need a video idea, I need an infographic idea or a blog idea. And what that does truly is kind of like force us to tell stories in the ways that are probably not best suited to that story, to our audience, to our own strategy. But the reason we do it is because we have a shared language. That's the most tangible part of our brainstorm is, well, I know what a video is, so I'll start with that. The way that we talk about the lens on our story, the perspective of our story, the topic or theme, we don't have as much of a shared language or an agreed upon way to kind of work through those options. And so that I think is one of the big hangups is starting format first, just because that's familiar. So that was one of the goals with the book was to say, look, we're going to start with the focus. We're going to start with, what am I trying to say? What's the message here? And once I'm clear on that, then you can ask, well, what's the best way to bring this to life? Or how can I bring this story to life through video? So you're really making sure that the story is at the center, and then you're sort of just presenting it in the most efficient way possible.
Well, and I know I've read the book, so I have an insider's view of this. But when you say it that way too, it also means once you have the story, you have a bunch of different formats.
Yeah.
Do you notice I use 10 100%. Fingers?
Yeah.
At least 10 formats, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the other part of, again, trying to change the way we think about it is it's really easy to go back to what's familiar for you. So for me, like I'm a writer, my default is always going to be, I could write a great piece about that.
No,
that
mine's a blog post. I can do a blog post. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like that doesn't necessarily, though, always serve my strategy, my goals, the message itself. I mean, if we were having this conversation, we could absolutely have done it written, but it would be just a very long written piece with back and forth, and it probably wouldn't do it justice. It's much better for us to be here face to face. And so it also kind of having that list of format options can also force you to think outside your own comfort zone in a way that's good, right? It's saying, okay, well, I haven't really done live video before, but maybe that would be the most engaging way to tell this story. Like maybe it's worth a shot. And if you're not giving yourself that moment to say what format is best, then you're not really making a conscious choice. You're just defaulting to whatever's comfortable. So it kind of helps you think outside the box a little bit.
That's really, yeah, and I can see a lot of light bulbs going off with people. For everybody, this is Melanie Deziel. If you've come late, this is the Conquered Leaders Amazon Live broadcast. We're interviewing her on her book Content Fuel, how to have generate unlimited story ideas. If you're new to the broadcast and you're watching it on Amazon Live, I think it's there, but it could be over here. Click the follow link so you get notified of all of these, and definitely get her book, because this creates, it's almost recipe like in a way, in a very freeing way of, I don't have to just stare at a blank screen anymore, or a blank piece of paper or whatever. You give such good frameworks for it. But what are some keys that you have for people, or how do you instruct people to free themselves up from the format and get to the story?
I think one of the things that is really helpful is having a prompt. And I think, it sounds so basic, and it is just a list of focuses and proposals for where you might focus your attention in the book. But again, just like we fall into familiar formats, we fall into familiar focuses, meaning I always create 13 things, 13 books to watch, 15 lists. You kind of fall into a familiar arrangement and perspective on your content, where you're making just lists or just style interviews, and if you have that list to run through, it's really helpful for helping you think in different ways. So we can just do like an example here to maybe make it feel a little more tangible. So throw out a business type, any old business type here.
Executive coaching, just randomly.
Okay. All right. So if we were going to tell that story, and we've got like our list of focuses that we talk about in the book, the first one is people. So obviously, if we're trying to say, look, we would be able to help you, how could I tell that story through the lens of people? Well, the instinct would be, I could talk about the customers, the executives that I've coached in the past, and tell their stories. Mm-hmm. But you could also talk to their employees to see the change that they saw in those executives, right? That would be another person that you might speak to get some change in perspective. You could talk about the people who have inspired you to become an executive coach. You could talk about, who are some other people? Let's see.
Other executive coaches maybe too, because I think it's a big universe. So I think there's more than enough work. Okay. Perfect.
So that would be some different ways to tell that story just through the lens of people. Now, what if we go to history? So what if we're going to tell this through history? I could talk about my background as an executive coach, kind of like how I got to this point. The history of executive coaching, like when did executive coaching become a thing, and what's sort of the evolution of that industry. If I'm a executive or a coach on a certain type of executive coaching, so say I'm like a leadership or management or life balance or public speaking, maybe you talk about the history of that particular niche, like what are some of the most infamous, public speaking executives. I don't know. I'm riffing here, but you get the gist.
Yeah.
So the next focus you might consider is process. So my guess is if you're doing coaching for executives, there are a lot of processes that you're going to be helping them work through.
Sure.
So you could create content showing them how to do all kinds of things relevant to your niche. It could be how to manage your calendar more efficiently. It could be how to communicate with direct reports when you're working remotely. It could be tools to use to organize your email inbox. I mean, there's a million different ways that you could kind of come up with, here's the steps that I recommend to go through this process so that they could replicate that for themselves.
And what you just did was chunk it down, which is so helpful, because I would have thought of, what's the process for coaching? Like, how do I work with clients?
You could do that too.
Which is good and okay, but I like the way you went too, which is much more engaging. Most people have a specific problem, not a general problem, and so it could be engaging their employees or checking their email or whatever. So, that's interesting. Well, so these prompts really open you up. How do you help with people that are speaking for a friend, would think, oh, wait, that history one crosses over into the people. Because if I start talking about the history, I'm going to talk about the people of stuff. That's bad because I already did the people prompt. Okay, good.
No, it's totally fine. In fact, in most cases, you will probably be using more than one focus and probably more than one format. If you're writing an article, you're probably also going to have an image in there somewhere. So it's totally okay for there to be overlap. But the idea is we may not have thought of that history focused piece if we were only thinking about people, and vice versa. So by going through that checklist and just saying, okay, could I tell this story through the lens of whatever that focus is, it kind of gets you thinking in different ways and breaks you outside your normal processes and just opens you up to a lot of opportunities. Now, we just went through, for executive coaches, we probably came up with like 20 ideas right there.
I'm so glad it was recorded.
We're probably not going to create all of those, but a couple of them might be really good for our business right now. A couple of them we might save for a future time when we have some new initiative. Some of them might be great things for us to partner with other, whether it's do a guest post or partner with other professionals and influencers in our space. And some maybe aren't worth anything at all. Maybe, like I was riffing there were probably a couple stinkers in there, I'm sure. Maybe we just leave those to the side, or they sort of inspire follow on where that wasn't quite right. But if we polish that a bit, it turns into some other idea. Nice. So it's really just about, getting out of that mindset that content ideas are scarce. They're everywhere, and there are so many different ways to tell a story that I don't want people to ever feel like I've got nothing to say, or there's nothing interesting here, or I'm just not creative enough to come up with something.
Well, it seems like those are all non-starters too. The minute you tell yourself that, your inner critic or your inner file cabinet person, your inner Google is going to look for the answers to prove you right. Oh, you're right. Yeah. You kind of are bad at this.
Well, my favorite thing to remind people too is like we think of creativity in terms of creation, like creating something, painting, music, whatever, content ideas, as this like elite thing that only some people have. And all it is an application of something we do all the time. So think about the last time you thought something could go wrong or you were worried about something. How many infinite ways did you creatively imagine it could go wrong?
Brilliant.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, we do this naturally. We are imaginative. We come up with scenarios. We think through so many different options. It's just about getting the right prompt. And so for some of us, fear or worry is a great prompt, and we're able to come up with lots of terrifying possibilities. So all we want to do is sort of tap into that monkey part of our brain and say, okay, if I just need a prompt to get going, then how can I create prompts for these other types of creativity I want to activate?
Okay, I love that. It's not just that I need to plumb that particular prompt, but it's, I can do that, so I can do that over here too. That's transferable.
Yes, 100%.
Because that's kind of my kryptonite as a super optimistic person, somebody that just dwells in all the possibilities of what can go wrong. Although there's a value in that, and there's a but if you're not willing to move beyond that, that becomes pushes my button.
I think that's my way of saying, like, look, you're in this place of thinking you don't have this skill, but look at how you've applied creativity in these other parts of your life. If you can just that sometimes is the trigger to think, oh yeah, actually I am very creative. I come up with so many possible disasters, like I'm very creative at that.
And they're really good. Like I could write I could do mini series on this. Episodes of 24 could have all of my disasters in them.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, okay, you've got that in you. It's just a matter of redirecting that attention to a more useful prompt, a more useful way to get your wheels spinning and come up with something that you could use for your business instead of something that's just going to keep you up at night.
Oh my goodness, that is great. So what, one of the things that when I'm working with clients and doing stories and I notice that I call it harvesting stories, that once you start doing this, you start seeing the stories too, especially when what your clients value. Those are the types of things you want to be writing about or talking about. But one of the things that I find that most of the people I work with struggle with, including myself, is how do you keep them? Like you just said, there could be some stinkers, but we know some of those stinkers could just need to marinate. They may actually be good at some point, but they shouldn't be taking your bandwidth now. So have you found ways or worked with people that found ways to not curate, but also just retain or
collect?
Collect. Thank you.
Yeah. So I get this question a lot, and I wish that there was one awesome answer, but I think that it really depends on the systems you already have. It is so much better for you to fit it into the system that you use currently for something along these lines than to try to create a new one. So if you're a Google Docs person, if you're all about Google Docs, then like make a Google Doc and just brain dump in there. You could do it as a spreadsheet if that allows you to move things around for priorities and assign them to people, whatever you need to do. I know some people who are great at keeping track of all those ideas in a spreadsheet or a Google Doc. For me, I use a task management system called Todoist. It's similar to like a Trello or Wunderlist or, some of those others, Asana. If you're using one of those and you're fluent in it, and that's how you track your tasks, keep one of those as like an undated, unassigned tasks. That's just a list of ideas. And that way it allows you to move it at some point into whatever, system or process you have for executing on that content. Some people I know keep like physical paper, like index cards, a notebook, a whiteboard if you never want to clean it off, I guess, whatever works for you.
I had that problem. I had this idea on my whiteboard, and I love the idea of a whiteboard, and I sketched out this intro sequence for my email, and I never wanted to get rid of it, even though I could take a picture of it, because with my moleskin, or my lectern or whatever, I take pictures and put it into Evernote.
Collection of moleskins over there.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just looking at your shelf.
But
I tried to take it into Evernote and use it, but I still haven't found a good way. What were you going to say?
I recently found this tool that is getting me as close to like that whiteboard experience digitally as I've been able to get to. I'm still experimenting with it, so I can't offer a ton of tips, but the tool is called Miro, Miro.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah, and I've been playing around with it. It is sort of like a digital whiteboard. You could zoom in, zoom out, create different sections, move stuff around, place sticky notes on it, color code things, which is like very much my thing. So I'm liking it so far. I haven't started using it to store content ideas, but I'm using it to work through the structure of my next book.
That's helpful, and that's good because it's not stuck on your wall. It's wherever you have a connection.
Yeah.
We use that for Diane Leonard is a Scrum Master and Agile coach, and she was teaching Scrum management technique. And we used it as teams where we would work on things together. It does, and it was free. That's the other part that was kind of
it's a really cool tool. So, and you can share it with people.
Miro,
which is
right?
Nice.
Miro?
Miro,
okay. Yeah. Cool. Now, so let's say people have these ideas. How do you know? There's so many ways, and I guess you call them formats, so many ways to get your story out. And there's so many outside competing demands on your time or on your attention. Yeah. So if you're a small business owner, everybody and their grandmother says what you should be doing. If you're a nonprofit, all your board members think that you should have a billboard or you should do this. So how do you, I guess is the first part listing all the different ways out?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's really helpful is listing all the things out, just so that you have sort of an inventory of your options. It's like if you were going to cook a meal and you weren't sure what to cook, you'd want to at least know what all your ingredients available are, right? So doing that same thing, listing out all of your formats, your options for distribution is really helpful. But I think the way you decide what to focus on is really going to depend on your individual and organizational goals and competencies. So awesome. The first thing you want to look at is what's going to make the biggest difference for our business. If your business is really focused on growing awareness, then you want to pick those things that you can spread as wide as possible. Something like, a video may have some limitations in terms of where you might be able to distribute it, but written text you can use just about everywhere. So that would be something to consider. If you're focused more on conversion, then, you might want to look at the focuses that are more product related to your products and services, because you're going to be evaluated based on how many conversions you're making. So tying these choices back to those broader organizational goals, what are we trying to do? Or if you're, a solopreneur, what are my broader business goals here to make sure that those actions are lining up? But the next thing that comes into play is your own competencies. And I mean that in the best possible way. The competency is, so I like to say everyone has a first content language, like a language of content that they're most fluent and most comfortable in. For me, that's writing. So if
for those of you that are listening right now, I know Daryl said that he's going to, he's already checking out Miro, but just chat in there what your first language might be for your, because I think that's a brilliant idea. Yeah. So yours is writing.
I love that. Writing for sure. So if I've got to create something quick or, quick turnaround, or it's high stress, I know I can rely on writing. I have all the tools I need. I can create it very quickly and easily. So that would be my go-to if I didn't have a lot of resources. I could do it on my phone or, in a notebook or something. If you are more drawn to audio, if you're like, man, I'm a podcaster, that's where I'm most comfortable, then maybe audio is where you go first because it's easiest and most comfortable for you to produce. So that's going to be one of the things you want to consider.
So those are the people on Clubhouse.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that's that. Right. It's sort of like I could listen to talk radio or I could listen to Clubhouse, and I remember talk radio before Clubhouse. But audio is clearly not my first, my go-to language.
But it could. So that actually is the next one you want to think about is exactly what you just said, your audience's preference for consumption. Because if you are really into creating audio and your audience is like, I work in a noisy environment and can never listen to audio, then like you're going to have a problem. There's going to be a disconnect there. That disconnect, though, can be overcome by talent. You could have a person who helps you translate from one to another by tools. So if I like to create audio, I can read out and, perform my blog post and record it and then have someone else transcribe it and turn it into writing. Have someone else take that audio and put visuals over it and turn it into a video. So you can find ways to bridge that gap, but you just want to be aware of it so that you can address it.
Oh, that's great. So you can still use your primary language. And Daryl says he documents mostly everything in Evernote. So I get that. So you can speak your first language, but then you can try to transition it to the dialect of your client or your that's audience, right. Whoever your audience is. It might not be your client.
Exactly. And it might differ in different contexts, right? So the way people consume content on LinkedIn might be very different from how they behave on your website or on your blog, right? Like there's going to be different preferences in different places, which is why sometimes it's helpful to have a couple options. That if we have this conversation here, we've got the live video that we're sharing out now. You're going to have the video recorded that you might upload to YouTube later. Yep. You could export the audio and have that as just a purely auditory experience.
I was thinking about that.
You can transcribe the audio, and now you've got a written blog post, right? Take a couple of screenshots of us posing, and now you've got images to go with. So it just gives you a lot of different options to distribute that in different ways and reach people who some people are going to want to watch live. Some people, like Daryl, right? He's here, he's engaging, he's part of the conversation. Other people maybe want to watch it on their own time or just listen or just read. So by having those different options, you tap into different segments of your audience too.
That's really, I love that because I know as a blogger, I have all the justifications why we need the words for search engine queries and all this other stuff. Yep. But I know that video is far more consumed than written. And in the trainings that I have in a nonprofit academy, which is a membership group site I run, I do pull out the MP3 of the training. And I have people that listen to, they don't need the video of the people talking about their slides or as great as our faces are, they wouldn't need that. They just want the audio to go in the car. So that's really, I love that. What if you mentioned a solopreneur, so I can feel I think hopefully if you're a solopreneur, you feel like, there are a lot of options. These prompts make sense, looking at the formats, thinking about my language, thinking about the language of the people I'm trying to communicate to. But I can also see the overwhelm of, I have to increase my visibility and make conversions. I have to do it all. So are there any prioritization ways that you help people with that? Or is it just, what are some ways that I know you probably have this too as a speaker and writer and.
Yeah. I mean, my first thing I always say is please do as I say and not as I do, because I am a mere mortal. And if you look at my own content practices, you will find gaps. You will find opportunities for improvement.
I should have pre-screened you. I didn't realize that.
True. But,
we have to go, everyone. Sorry about that. No.
I think it's important for me to be real about that because I think I'm facing a lot of those similar struggles that solopreneurs are. I mean, as you mentioned when we first joined, I've got an 18-month-old and it's a freaking pandemic. Like there's a lot going on, in an ideal world, would I have all the time I used to and be able to produce consistent quality content across every platform? Sure. But we don't live in an ideal world,
No, we don't.
And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that because otherwise we create unrealistic expectations for our audience too. So for me, it feels like a responsibility to be honest about those kinds of things. Yes, in an ideal world, you'd be present in these different places. You'd create content consistently. You'd have video and a podcast and a great email list and a, engaged blog, but like, that's probably not feasible for a lot of us. So again, I think the way you choose where to prioritize comes down to those same three things we talked about before. So what's going to make the biggest impact on your business? What aligns best with those goals? What can you do, most easily? So, for me, if I need to do something, I'm probably going to do a blog because I know I can deliver on that. Whereas for me, starting a video series, it's going to be a lot more work, a much bigger learning curve. I need to get software. I need to get, it's just a bigger lift. So if my goal is to get something done and make a difference in my business, then I'm probably going to rely on that first content language or languages that are most comfortable. And then again, that third one being, does that line up with what my audience wants? And if not, how can I kind of bridge that gap? So that's where I would do the prioritization, is just figure out it's really about a formula for what's realistic and helpful.
You're saying that helped me realize just before the pandemic hit, I went out and hung out with my friend Chris Davenport, who had me look at the different streams of income in my business, what I wanted them to be, and then what my competencies were on a scale of 1 to 5. It was just random 1 to 5, but what they needed to be where I wanted them to be for the next year. And it was really helpful for me to be able to see, I need to learn more in this one stream than is feasible for helping me get to my goal. So I could see somebody saying too, here are the different format, or here are the different stories I need to tell, or goals I need to have with them. Mm-hmm. And my competency, like you were saying, for video, I know it's important. I know it's engaging. My learning curve is too steep for the time constraints that I have for generating revenue or servicing clients. So that's really...
The other thing I always just like to give people permission here is, like, it is so much better for you to be excellent in 1 or 2 places than to be mediocre and overwhelmed in 5, 10, or 15 places. And I think there's a little bit of like this hustle porn culture that we've ended up in, where everybody's talking about their, like, we've automated everything, and it's like, you got to post 10 times a day here, 4 times a day here, and stay up all night.
And I'm doing a LinkedIn Live every day of the week.
Yeah. It's just like, that's wonderful for you. I'm super happy for you, but like, that does not work for my life. And so, if we set ourselves up for that comparison, usually against people who have a team of multiple people executing for them, like, we're going to be disappointed. We're going to be overwhelmed. We're going to tap out. And so I'd much rather people choose and say, look, I'm just going to have the best dang Instagram there is for, local salons in my town. If that's what it is, then like, do that so well. And then once you're great at that, feel free to add on additional things as you're able, as you have the bandwidth and there's demand for it.
Wow. I feel like my stress levels just receded some. Thank you.
Good.
I appreciate that. Deep breathing now. That's I think that's feels particularly scary when you are trying to focus on one thing, because so many of us are able to see all the different things, but then we end up with, I was just on somebody's Twitter, looking for their Twitter handle, and their last post was 2 years ago. So it's all of a sudden, being mediocre across all the different spectrums. I've noticed, I don't know if you've seen this, a lot of people aren't on Facebook. I've noticed an increasing number of professionals that aren't on Facebook. I
go on Facebook. I post in a couple of groups that are helpful for me, that are, networking opportunities, but I couldn't even tell you the last time I posted something on my own Facebook page, because it's just not how I connect with people. If I want to talk to some of those folks, we're going to text or hop on Zoom or, message one another. I'd rather reach out directly. And again, I think the other thing is, like, this starts to feel like work. Like,
it does, doesn't it?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to have to update everything and notice everybody's everything. It's just too much.
It is so, yes, I'm with you. I totally get that. That is, I just actually hired somebody to help with some of my content, because it was taking 4 hours to do the appropriate different varied things on the different platforms. And it wasn't even creating content. It was just publicizing content that was being created.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's important to acknowledge too. Like, it's a lot of work. It was so much easier. Like, I imagine the blissful days of journalism from like 20 years ago, when you'd write your story, probably on a typewriter, like just one, barely a word processor, send it. And then like you were done. That was the end of your responsibility as a creator. You moved on. And it's like now we got to think about all these different formats. We've got to format it for the web. We're worried about keywords. We've got to have multiple headline options to test. We need 3 different images to see what clicks better. And then we've got to share it on every platform. And it's just like, man, we're more distributors than creators some days, it feels like.
Absolutely. Now, how do you, I know one of the things you talk about also or help people with is their brand integrity and their brand storytelling. Yeah. How do you keep it constant? It seems like it could be very easy to be one brand in one place and another brand or another voice in another place that looks like your multiple personality sort of brand as opposed to a cohesive. Because ideally, it seems like whatever platform or format you're in, people should be able to say, "Oh, that rings true to the." I know that it's this company or this person. So how do you help people?
Yeah,
with that?
I think that is a fine line too. I think people feel like there's some issue with being a little bit different in these different places. But I make a lot of analogies. You've probably seen this already, and you know this by now at this point in our conversation. But like, think about the way you talk to different people in your life. I mean, the way we're chatting right now is probably not the way like I would talk to my 18-month-old when I leave this room. It's probably not the way you might talk to one of your clients or, you know, a family member, your spouse versus your friends. You know, it's totally okay for us to adapt that voice because we are one person, but our voice comes out in different ways depending on the needs of our audience. You know, if I use this kind of language with my 18-month-old, I'm not going to get very far. I need to adapt.
Because she's smarter than I am, right? So you need to use higher language.
She's much more likely to throw something than you are, though. Okay. So it's like, it's different.
And it would hit you because right now it just hit my screen.
Right. But so I think it's okay to have some level of comfort with switching up your tone of voice and the way your voice comes to life in those different contexts. But to your point, it's easy for me to know these are all coming out of my mouth. They are all authentically me, just me presenting different ways. When we're doing that on behalf of a brand, it's rarely as clear. So you often have to document that. So a lot of the work we do with clients is doing like a brand tone and voice audit. So we'll create documentation that says, this is who we are. This is who we're not. This is how we show up in these different places.
Oh, wow.
And that could be defining things like, we are helpful, but we are not talking down to people. We are friendly, but we're not too casual. Like you really need to, I already know who I am and how I show up, but our brand, we don't have that depth of understanding of the voice and the tone. So we really need to document it out and workshop it out. And then that gives us some really good guidance. So when you have that all detailed, when some new platform pops up, when TikTok or Clubhouse shows up, you can look back at that document and say, okay, we don't have a voice for that yet, but we know since we are friendly and approachable and coaches and we are not these things, here's the way our voice would manifest in this particular place. So having that sort of brand voice documentation is really helpful, and it helps with outsourcing. Like you don't want to have to be the only one who knows how to
that's where I stumbled on this. I got my first VA and I realized she doesn't know what there's a whole bunch of assumptions I've made about the way I communicate. So with a virtual assistant, I just started it, and it was painstakingly hard. But Stephen Covey always said to go fast with humans, go slow. And taking the slowness of saying we respond within 24 hours. We assume our clients are intelligent. We engage them from a place of believing the best, not from thinking that they're, there was an edge in one of their voices that was. It just seemed a little bit more Wazowski, where's your paperwork? Not the kind of gregarious, inclusive type thing that I was going for. So listing that out is so helpful, and I love that you made the connection. Then on different platforms, you could just say this is who we are. So how does that manifest on TikTok? I get scared about I'd have to start doing these dance moves and cup dance things. And,
I will say I'm like I said, I try to be honest and admit like we're all human, right? So I am a lurker on TikTok. I have not built a content strategy for content strategists on TikTok or Clubhouse really yet. But I am consuming and learning because for me that's a big part of it. But yeah, I mean I think what I know right now is that my voice authentically doesn't show up on TikTok in a way that would be helpful for my strategy. So I'm going to hold off until I can do that.
Did you, was your experience the same as mine? My daughter got me on TikTok. Did your daughter do that too?
No, I got myself on there. But maybe because of her, sometimes you have those moments where you're just like, I just need to go and just,
well, now I understand that. I lost an hour, my first hour of consumption of TikTok last week because my daughter kept showing me stuff about GameStop, the GameStop betting things. And then I started, I didn't want to get on it. This is nerdiness. I didn't want to get on it in part because I didn't want to mess up the algorithm. Like I knew it was really quick, rapid AI, and I wanted it to be right to keep me away from stuff that, to keep me toward the stuff I'd be interested in. So she started showing me a bunch. And so I was like, I got to log in. All right, I'll consume these.
It's honestly, it's very impressive. That's one of the things that I've really enjoyed studying and seeing how it reacts is just the way the content you're being served is really in response to your mood and what you like and very nuanced in ways where you start to see really niche content. And you're like, how did the internet know that about me? That, that I've been really thinking about mason jars a lot lately.
For me, it was the bell pepper cutting. I never knew you could cut a bell pepper that way. That was crazy. But I love that about stories too, because I think what we can do is when we start exposing ourselves to those things, we start thinking about how can we, in our automated drip sequences for onboarding new clients or something, what are the stories that might tend to be the stories that are the right sequence for people based on what we've talked to them about. So so I do like the idea of the way you're thank you for helping me, first of all, justify my TikTok consumption and give it some legs beyond the little screen on my phone. I appreciate that.
I think it's important for us to do that because I think, even for small business owners, that's one thing I always recommend. It's like, look, turn it into a leisure activity, turn it into a scavenger hunt. It's like every now and then when you have a couple minutes, go see what your competition is up to. Go watch their TikToks, look at their YouTube videos, just consume it because your goal is not to copy them. Your goal is not to outdo them. It's just to have an understanding of what else is out there. It might give you ideas for things that apply differently to your business. It might help you see white spaces that you can help fill. It might just make you laugh because somebody else understands, and you can relate to that content.
Oh, you're a nicer person than me. I was thinking it might make you laugh because you realize that you're far better than your competition, which is where I was thinking. But you're like, it could be just that there's other people that get it.
Well, I mean, I think there's something to be said for that. Those are your competition. They're still your people. They still have a lot of the same fears and goals and processes, and so there's something to be gained from that, I think, and it makes you feel more comfortable. I think to show up in those places if you understand the conversations that are happening there, or even if you've just been eavesdropping, like just lurk a little bit. It's fine. Give yourself time to learn how it works.
So would that also work with finding stories? Because what you just said, I think a lot of people miss the social part of social media where you can actually listen. Yeah. You get to listen into other people's cocktail party conversations and hear what words they're using. So that would probably, would that be helping define your audience? How would that fit in?
It could. I mean, it could help define your audience, but I think it's also like, for example, how we're saying, I'm not comfortable creating on TikTok. So I've got sort of two choices there. Do I say, okay, TikTok's not for me and I'm out and I never go back? Or do I say, all right, well, let me try to find people who might be appealing to my same audience, who maybe are also marketers or also public speakers or also authors. Let me just see what they're doing. It might not be right for me. Like maybe I don't want to be the dancing author or like the, rock and roll public speaker, but seeing what they're doing and how they're bringing their brand to life and how they're telling their story might give me comfort that I could do it my own way. It might give me inspiration for how I could do it, in a way that serves my goals. And it could just make me feel more comfortable. Like, hey, they had an awkward video, so it's fine if I have an awkward video. It just kind of like makes you feel more comfortable because it's not as foreign and scary anymore just by hanging out there for a while.
Well, I love that. So as we bring this conversation to a close, you just mentioned something about feeling comfortable about feeling comfortable about maybe not having a great video. How do you, are there ways that you've seen people be able to insulate themselves for risk or prepare their team for, I know one of my colleagues created a failure fund where he had his staff come to him with failure ideas, ideas that were doomed to fail, and then they would try to put them into practice because there was something they could learn or something. Right? I think the riskiest thing we can do in our world right now is avoid risk. So, what are some ways with the stories that you've seen people be able to know that good enough is okay, and sometimes you're just going to drop a lead balloon?
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was like a special sauce, but honestly, I just say something akin to that. I mean, we've got a lot of colleagues in our space who have great guidance for this kind of thing. I love Brian Fanzo always says, just press the damn button. Like, you got to make something or you're never going to learn, right? So sometimes that is the best approach. As my caveat is, I always say, study, lurk, understand what you're doing, and then press the damn button. Like, do it strategically, which I think is what Brian means too. But just,
but you'd spell it out a little bit more than Brian.
I'm a studier. And so, like I said, I would lurk for a while. I'd probably read a book about that topic or some blog posts about it. Once I feel like, okay, I've got enough information, it's time to go. Like, you got to try it at some point. There's never going to be, and this is true of so many things in marketing, in life, there's never going to be a perfect time. There's never going to be a perfect opportunity. It's never going to be the exact right moment where you feel 100% confident that everything is perfect. Like, that's just not how life works. And so at some point, if you've done your diligence and you've got a plan, then go for it. And I think we see this in so many parts of our lives. We know that it takes time to do something well. Nobody expects a parent the first day you have a newborn to know everything about parenting, and yet we put that same pressure on ourselves, right? You get a learner's permit before you get your driver's license because it takes time to get skilled at it, right? And so we kind of need to give ourselves that learner's permit for whatever platform you're experimenting with. Like, it's okay. You might need some supervision. You might need to try things over and over until you get it right. But at some point, you'll feel comfortable enough to set off on an adventure on your own.
Love the learner's permit. That's so good. I mean, there's so much in here that I'm glad this is recorded, and we will have it here on Amazon and also on YouTube with the Page 2 Authors playlist. But you use youtube.com/Mark Pittman, MarcPitman. Melanie, where can people find more about Story Fuel, working with you? And I know you can buy the book here, but also where are the good places for them to connect with you?
For sure. So my name spelling is here, Melanie Deziel. If you search for me on social platform of your choice, you will find me to varying degrees of presence, as we've talked about here. I'm particularly active on Twitter. So if you're a Twitter person, you can find me there as M. Deziel. If you are wanting to learn more about the book or us or how we can help you through coaching, consulting, having us do a workshop for you, our website is storyfuel.co. So it's storyfuel.co. And you can find everything you need to know, social links, lots of resources you can download, headline guides and calls to action guides, and a workbook that goes along with the book as well. So storyfuel.co is probably your best central repository.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for so generously sharing your time. And I know that we've had viewers that have been really engaged already in the chat. Remember, it's don't get stuck in format. Think about your story first, and then think about the different ways you can do that, and use your prompts of people, history. There's a whole list of prompts and expanded upon in the book. And then I would encourage everybody that's watching this at whatever time you're watching this is choose one thing to give yourself permission to have a learner's permit for, and just go out and try it. And let us know, either in the chats here on YouTube or follow us on Twitter or something. Just let us know what your learner permit is for. Until next time. Thanks, everyone. Have fun generating unlimited stories. Bye now.